Have you ever entered a job thinking it was a great opportunity, but did you soon realize that it was a complete trap? Maybe at first everything seemed perfect. An irresistible offer, incredible benefits, a promising environment. But over time, the mask falls off and you realize you're surrounded by toxic colleagues, authoritarian managers, and empty promises. What once seemed like a step towards success has turned into a real professional nightmare. If you've ever felt that something wasn't right in your job, beware. There are clear signs that a vacancy can be a trap. And if you don't know how to identify them in time, you can end up trapped in an environment of exploitation, psychological pressure, and lack of recognition. And the worst, it takes a lot of people a long time to realize that they have fallen into this trap. At first, you try to ignore the signs. Maybe it's just a phase. Every job has its challenges. I can't be ungrateful for having this opportunity. But the reality is that you may be wasting time and energy in a place that will never value you. Have you noticed how some colleagues always seem to come out unscathed while you strive and only receive demands? Have you noticed how some promises made in the interview simply don't come true? Or how the climate of competition and gossip seems more important than your actual performance? Many companies create a facade of opportunity, but in fact, they are real traps that suck your motivation, compromise your mental health, and make you increasingly distant from your professional goals. Now, the big question is, how do you know if you're getting into one of these traps before it's too late? How to identify the signs that show that this work can be a sentence of frustration and emotional exhaustion. If you want to avoid falling into this hole, you need to understand the warning signs now. Because if you don't realize it in time, you can end up like many people, years invested in a job that only wears you out, without real growth, without appreciation, and without perspective for the future. And the most shocking? Many of these traps are already holding you back from the first day of work, and you haven't even realized it yet. So pay attention to the end of this video, because I'm going to show you the most dangerous signs that a job is a trap. And if you ignore them, you could end up paying a very high price. If you are looking for a job and come across an offer that seems like a dream, beware. Many professionals have fallen into the trap of overpromises, only to find out later that they were entering a true corporate nightmare. And do you know what the big problem is? These companies know exactly how to manipulate your expectation, offering a perfect package that seems to be the great chance of your life. But if something seems too good to be true, it probably is. When you see a position with a salary above the market average, guaranteed rapid growth, and incredible benefits without many demands, your first thought may be, what an incredible opportunity. I finally found a job that values employees. But the reality can be quite different. Many companies use this tactic as bait, creating a false sense of exclusivity to attract candidates. Have you ever noticed how some job descriptions seem more like a promise of a perfect life than a real job? They use words like accelerated growth, real meritocracy, generous bonuses, but without explaining how this actually happens. They say that everyone grows fast here, but they do not show real examples of employees who have prospered. They say that the salary is much above average, but they do not explain how this remuneration works in practice. It is exactly at this point that you need to activate your distrust radar. One of the most common tricks of these companies is to hide the true conditions of the vacancy. Often that high salary is accompanied by abusive goals, exhausting working hours, and unsustainable demands. What seemed to be a chance to earn well, in fact, turns into an environment where you are always on the edge, pressured to produce beyond reason, with impossible deadlines, and a manager who only knows how to charge without offering real support. And you know what happens when you start to realize that? The company has already engaged you emotionally. You already see yourself in that position. You've told your family. You've dreamed of the possibilities that this new job could provide you. And then, even when the first signs of trouble appear, you hesitate. You try to convince yourself that every job has its challenges, that maybe you just need to adapt better. But in the meantime, the company is getting the most out of you without offering you what it really promised. Another important point: be wary of companies that say you will grow fast without explaining how. Professional growth doesn't happen by magic. If a company really provides development, it has clear processes, structured career plans, and concrete examples of employees who have evolved there. But when you ask about it and the answer is vague, or when everything seems to depend only on your effort with no real guarantees, turn on the red alert. And here comes another detail. Many of these companies hide high turnover rates. Employees enter, notice the trap, and quickly leave. But while they are inside, they are sucked to the maximum. The cycle repeats itself with new hires who fall for the same illusory promise. If you notice that the company is always hiring for the same roles, that it has a lot of negative reviews from former employees, or that the team seems to be always changing, this could be a strong indication that you're about to enter a destructive work environment. Now think with me, have you ever heard of that phrase, "the company is like a family"? If so, pay even more attention. This discourse, which should represent acceptance and a good work environment, is often used as a justification for exploitation and lack of limits. Companies that truly value their employees offer fair and transparent conditions. Those that play with the emotion of employees create this idea that you have to sacrifice yourself for the good of the group, for the success of the team. And the pitfalls don't stop there. Some companies offer incredible benefits on paper, but when you get there, you realize that almost no one can use them in practice. Health insurance with so many restrictions that it serves no purpose, bonuses that rely on absurd goals, and a culture that discourages you from actually taking vacations or time off. Have you ever seen this happen? That discourse of "we work hard, but we reward ourselves in the end" actually hides an environment where rest and quality of life are seen as weakness. Another classic sign of a trap is vacancies that promise freedom and autonomy, but in practice mean that you will be without support, without training, and without any kind of structure. Companies like this throw all the responsibility on you, expecting you to deliver impossible results without receiving the proper tools to do so. If you realize that the company wants you to learn everything by yourself, wear the shirt, and make it happen, but does not make it clear what resources and support are available, this can be a strong indication that you will be charged without having real conditions to deliver a good job. And there's one more thing. Beware of promises, of unrealistic commissions. Many companies that work with sales or individual goals say that the sky's the limit for your salary. But the reality is that these commissions are almost never attainable. You enter believing that you can earn a lot, but soon realize that only a small group or no one really reaches these advertised values. And who doesn't hit the targets? He suffers pressure, is treated as incompetent, and is often discarded unceremoniously. At the end of the day, companies that really offer good conditions don't need to go overboard with promises. They simply show their structure, offer transparency in the selection process, and let the employees themselves be proof of the healthy environment. If you feel like the company is trying to convince you too much, using a speech that is too perfect to be real, trust your gut and do some thorough research before making a decision. Because the worst mistake you can make is ignoring these signs and ending up stuck in a routine of professional exhaustion, pressure, and frustration. So before accepting any offer, ask the right questions. Investigate the company's reputation and don't fall for the tale of the dream vacancy, which deep down is a nightmare in disguise. If there's one thing that reveals a lot about a company, it's the employee turnover rate. Have you noticed how some companies are always hiring for the same vacancies? It seems that they can never maintain a stable team. There is always an open recruitment ad, and when you dig a little deeper, you find that no one stays there for long. This is no coincidence. And if a company has a constant flow of professionals in and out, you can be sure that there is something very wrong going on behind the scenes. Many of these companies take advantage of the enthusiasm of new employees, sell an idea of growth, opportunities, and an amazing environment. But when you start working, you realize that the reality is quite different. The atmosphere is heavy, the demands are excessive, the managers are authoritarian, and the stress is constant. It doesn't take long for professionals to feel worn out and want to leave, and the company simply replaces those who leave with someone new, repeating this endless cycle. And you know the worst? Many do this on purpose, because they have already structured their business model to exploit employees to the fullest and then discard them when they can't take it anymore. Now, before accepting any vacancy, you need to thoroughly investigate the company's reputation, and there are some pretty simple ways to do that. First, go on LinkedIn and research current employees. See how long they've been with the company. If most professionals last a few months or at most a year, this is already a red alert. Companies that truly value their employees are able to retain talent for longer because they offer a healthy work environment and real opportunities for growth. Then, look for websites that specialize in company reviews, such as Glassdoor and Indeed. Read the comments of former employees and see what are the main problems pointed out. Often in these reports, you find clear patterns such as complaints about lack of respect from leadership, excessive pressure, underwhelming salaries, or even abusive practices in the workplace. If multiple people say the same things about a company, it can't be ignored. One or another negative evaluation may be something punctual, but when there is a flood of bad testimonials, you already know that the problem is systemic. Another very effective way to find out the truth is to talk directly to those who have worked there. If you know someone who has worked at this company, ask them what their day-to-day life was like, what the managers were like, if the promises made in the interview were fulfilled, and why they decided to leave. If the answer involves words like toxicity, exploitation, emotional exhaustion, or inhumane demand, you already know what to do, right? Escape this trap before it's too late. And there's more. Companies with high turnover often try to mask this information during the selection process. You can even ask in the interview about the average length of stay of employees, and often the recruiter will try to give a generic answer, such as, "People leave for personal reasons," "We are always innovating and renewing our team," or even, "Those who have a profile aligned with the company stay for years." But in practice, this may just be a way to hide the truth. A company that truly values its employees doesn't need to justify so many departures. Now, a detail that many people ignore. If the company does selection processes frequently but never really grows, it is a bad sign. Have you noticed that some companies are always hiring for the same position but don't expand their operations? This means that professionals are not able to stay there for long. A healthy company grows and creates new positions, but a toxic company only replaces people who can't stand the environment. Another worrying sign is the lack of experienced employees within the company. If the majority of the team is made up of newcomers or junior professionals, the company may struggle to retain experienced talent because they simply do not accept being treated abusively and leave quickly. And the result of this? A disorganized work environment without leadership references and without people with enough knowledge to guide new hires. In other words, a generalized mess. And there is an even more serious point, the impact of high turnover on your own career. When you join a company that changes employees all the time, your chances of growth are minimal. This is because many times you do not receive the proper support to learn and evolve within the company because those who could teach you have already left. In addition, managers and directors see you as just another number in the replacement queue, so they do not invest in your development. And before you know it, you've spent months or even years in this environment without really making progress. Now let me tell you a secret that few people talk about. Some companies have high rates of forced layoffs. This means that even if you're doing a good job, you can be fired out of the blue because the company has already structured its culture that way. They create an environment where employees are always insecure, afraid of losing their jobs, and this generates absurd psychological pressure. If you work in a place where people are let go for no apparent reason, where colleagues are always worried about unexpected layoffs, where the culture of fear prevails, then it's more than clear that this company is not a good place to build your career. So before accepting any proposal, do some detailed research. Log on to LinkedIn, search for former employees, read reviews, and if possible, ask to talk to someone who has been there. You can avoid many problems just by doing this prior check. What can't happen is that you get a job thinking you've found an incredible opportunity, and a few months later, realize that you're in a trap that will only harm your mental health, motivation, and professional growth. Now, tell me here in the comments, have you ever worked in a company like this where people didn't stop? How long did you stay there? Write it down below because I want to know your experience and, who knows, help you see something you hadn't noticed before. If there is something that can turn a job into a real nightmare, it is the figure of an authoritarian boss and a toxic work culture. You may even enter a company thinking that you have found a good salary, interesting benefits, and a seemingly promising environment, but if the leadership is abusive, controlling, and disrespectful, there is no structure that holds a healthy environment. And often, the signs that you are about to fall into this trap appear right in the selection process, but people, excited about the vacancy, end up ignoring the warnings and only realize the mistake after they are already trapped in this cycle of stress and emotional exhaustion. The first major indication that the company may have a toxic environment is when recruiters and interviewers avoid talking about the company's culture or give very vague answers when asked about the work environment. You ask about what the day-to-day is like in the company, how the teams work together, how the managers deal with conflicts, and instead of objective answers, you only receive generic phrases such as, "Here we are like a family," "Our team is very dynamic," or "We like resilient people who know how to deal with challenges." This should already light up a red alert immediately. Healthy and well-structured companies have clear values, a well-defined culture, and transparent policies for dealing with conflicts and people management. If the company can't give you straight answers about what the work environment is like and how employees are treated, they're probably hiding something. Another major sign of a toxic environment is excessive control on the part of managers. A boss who wants to know what you're doing every minute, who monitors your lunch break, who demands justifications for every small action in your day, is not a good leader, it's a tyrant. And believe me, there are many professionals who have gotten used to this type of environment and think that this is normal, but it is not. If you feel watched all the time, without the freedom to do your job autonomously, then this is not a healthy environment to be in. And here comes one of the worst types of toxic bosses, those who use the excuse that the company is a family to justify abuse. They make employees feel emotionally involved with the company, so they feel guilty if they try to impose boundaries. Have you noticed how some companies have a work culture where people are charged to work overtime without earning anything extra? Where employees feel they need to be available at all times? Where those who take vacations or days off are seen as lazy? This is a direct reflection of the toxic mentality of managers who make you believe that you need to sacrifice yourself for the good of the company. And that's because, in the minds of these authoritarian bosses, employees aren't individuals with rights, boundaries, and personal lives, but rather disposable parts that can be sucked to the limit. And of course, the consequence of this is an environment where people are always burned out, always afraid of losing their jobs, always walking on eggshells to avoid conflicts. A place where no one feels safe to express their ideas, where criticism is repressed, where employees are afraid to speak, afraid to make mistakes, and afraid to question. Have you ever worked in a place like this, where everyone seems to walk with fear, where people speak softly in the corridors so as not to be heard, where no one has the courage to give a different opinion from the boss because they know they will be retaliated against? If so, then you've already had a toxic boss and an abusive work environment. And the worst part is that many companies do not admit that they have this problem. When asked how they deal with team management, conflicts, or performance evaluations, they disengage, change the subject, or answer you in a superficial way. And that's precisely why you need to be smart at the time of the interview. One of the most effective ways to test if the company has a toxic environment is to ask the recruiter or future manager direct questions. Ask, how do you handle conflicts in the team element? Serious companies have well-defined processes to solve internal problems fairly. Now, if the answer is vague or something like, our team understands each other well, so we rarely have conflicts, be suspicious. Every company has conflicts. The question is not whether they happen or not, but how they are resolved. Another essential question: how does the company evaluate employee performance element? If the company has fair and well-defined criteria, they will explain it to you clearly. But if the answer is generic, if there are no clear evaluation indicators, or if it depends only on the manager's perception, this is a huge warning sign. Toxic companies often use subjective evaluations to punish employees who don't fit into the authoritarian culture and to favor those who are part of the company's political game. And let's not forget one of the worst types of toxic bosses: those who are manipulative and insecure. They are managers who cannot stand being questioned, who need to have absolute control over everything, who make a point of lowering their employees to feel superior. They are those bosses who yell, humiliate, create rivalries within the team and play against each other. If in the interview you feel that your future boss has an arrogant attitude, that he tries to intimidate you or demonstrate superiority, run away from this position as soon as possible. And do you know how you can notice these signs even before the interview? Researching the company and its managers. Go to LinkedIn and see the leader's history. See how long they've been in the job, what their profile looks like, what former employees say about them. Also look for reviews on sites like Glassdoor and Indeed, because employees often expose the reality of the work environment themselves. Toxic companies and authoritarian bosses leave traces. People talk about it, stories spread. You just have to do a little research to avoid falling into this trap. Because the worst mistake you can make is to ignore these signs and take a job that will suck your mental health, destroy your motivation, and hinder your professional growth. If there's something that can turn a job into a living hell, it's when the demands are absurd, but the company offers very little in return. Do you know that vacancy that on paper seems incredible? But when you start working, you realize that the demands are disproportionate, the structure is chaos, and the promises made in the interview evaporate into thin air. This is one of the most dangerous signs that your job can be a trap. And the worst: many companies use this tactic to suck as much as possible out of employees without offering any fair compensation. They sell the idea that you will be part of something great, that you will have opportunities for growth, and that the effort will be rewarded. But in practice, What happens is exploitation disguised as dedication and disorganization disguised as challenge. And if you don't realize this in time, you can end up stuck in a cycle of exhaustion, devaluation, and professional frustration. One of the most common pitfalls in this type of environment is when the contract says one thing, but the reality of the work is completely different. You are hired with labor rights guaranteed by law, with a fixed schedule, but you soon realize that the company expects you to work as if you were a PJ, with no time to leave, no overtime pay, no minimum structure to perform your work. The demands come from all sides, the deadlines are impossible, but any complaint you make is received with that ready-made speech. Here, everyone gives their blood. Whoever wears the shirt for real makes it happen. If you want to grow, you need to give your best. But wait, give your all without getting anything in return? This is not recognition, this is exploitation. And many people only realize this too late, when they are already mentally exhausted, loaded with impossible tasks, and stuck in an environment where no one respects their limits. Another classic sign that the company is a real trap is when the salary does not match the workload. You come in thinking that you will receive a fair value for what you do, but you soon realize that in order to keep this job, you need to do the work of 3 people at the same time. They demand absurd productivity from you. They want you to be always available. They expect you to solve problems that are not even part of your role. And the worst, they make it seem like you should feel grateful for the opportunity. And do you know how these companies do to justify this? They create an environment where the fear of being fired makes employees accept anything. Have you ever noticed that in some companies people work exhausted but no one complains? This is because, deep down, everyone knows that if you open your mouth to question the working conditions, you can be fired without the slightest ceremony. It is a dangerous psychological game where the company holds employees hostage to fear and insecurity. But it doesn't stop there. Another big warning that you are getting into a trap is when the company simply does not have organized internal processes. You arrive on the first day and you don't get any proper training. The information is passed on anyway. No one knows exactly who does what. And the phrase you hear the most is, "Here, everyone gets by as they can." This type of environment is a complete disaster. Serious and structured companies have clear processes, well-defined training, and an organized workflow. But companies that just want to suck as much as they can out of employees without investing in them, throw all the responsibilities in your lap and expect you to figure out how to do your job on your own. And the worst, when something goes wrong, the blame always falls on you. Have you ever been in a situation like this, where everything was confusing, no one helped you, but the demands came from all sides? This is one of the biggest signs that the problem is not you, but the company that does not have the structure to work properly. And here comes the cruelest detail. Even when you do everything in the best possible way, these companies still make you feel insufficient. They create an environment where employees never feel like they're doing enough, where recognition never comes, where you try your hardest but never get praise, encouragement, or any form of appreciation. On the contrary, the more you dedicate yourself, the more they overwhelm you. And if you think about asking for a raise or some improvement in your working condition, the answer is always the same. Now is not the time. Maybe next quarter. When the company is more structured, we will review it. But that right moment never comes. They just want you to keep working yourself to death without asking for anything in return. Now, what can you do to avoid falling into this kind of trap? Before accepting any job offer, you need to analyze the structure of the company very carefully. Ask about internal processes, understand what the workflow is like, see if there is adequate training and real support for employees. If the company does not know how to answer these questions clearly, this is already a sign that chaos is guaranteed. And another essential thing, don't ignore what former employees say. Go on platforms where people leave reviews about companies and see what the top complaints are. If there are many complaints about overwork, lack of recognition, absurd demands, and disorganized leadership, you know, it's a trap. If you notice that the company asks for too much and offers too little, hurry up before it's too late. Your mental health, your quality of life, and your career are worth much more than being stuck in an environment where no one values you. And the effort is never enough. If you've made it this far, you now have a real trap radar at work. You already know how to identify the signs that a company may be putting you in a situation of exploitation, promising you growth without structure, throwing you into a toxic environment without support, or forcing you to work in abusive conditions with no fair return. And believe me, this awareness is golden, because from the moment you understand the patterns of problematic companies, no one fools you anymore. You will no longer fall for the conversation of recruiters who just want to fill a vacancy without caring about the well-being of employees. He will no longer accept any job offer just because he needs work, without first investigating whether it is really worth it. And most importantly, you will no longer let a bad job destroy your self-esteem, your mental health, and your professional future. Now, I need to be very direct with you, because the truth is that many people spend years of their lives stuck in jobs that only wear them out, simply because they didn't realize the trap in time. Or worse, they realized, but did not have the courage to leave for fear of unemployment, lack of confidence, or because they felt hostage to that company. But let me tell you something. You always have a choice. No company has the right to suck you to the limit. No company should treat you as disposable. And if you are living this, if every day you feel a weight on your back before going to work, if you feel exploited, pressured, without recognition, maybe it is past time to rethink where you are, because at the end of the day, you don't work just to survive. You deserve a job that values you, that gives you real opportunities for growth, that respects your limits, that makes you feel part of something bigger without having to sacrifice your quality of life. And that exists. But to find a job like this, you need to protect yourself. You need to be strategic. You need to investigate before accepting any vacancy. And above all, you need to stop normalizing toxic environments and abusive leadership. If anything I've said here today made sense to you, I want you to make a decision now. You can no longer live on autopilot, ignoring the signs and accepting less than you deserve. I want you, starting today, to commit to never taking a job again, without first evaluating everything carefully. And if you're already in a bad job, where you feel undervalued, where your effort is never enough, where you feel like you're just surviving and not growing, then it's time to start making a plan to get out of that situation. Because what I see, most are people suffering in the workplace and thinking that that's just the way it is, that work is boring, that every job has its problems. But there is a difference between normal day-to-day challenges and a destructive environment. And the difference between those who spend years suffering and those who build a successful career is that successful people do not accept this type of environment. They know they deserve more and are preparing to seek something better. Now, I want to know from you, have you ever fallen into a trap at work? Ever realized you were stuck in a toxic job and didn't know how to get out? How did you realize it was a trap? Tell me here in the comments, because I want to read your story. He writes there, I do not accept to be exploited, so I know that you really get the message and are ready to protect yourself from these companies. And, of course, subscribe to the channel right now, because here I always bring content that will help you shield yourself against pitfalls in the job market, build a strong career, and gain respect in the professional environment. So if you want to grow and stop falling into traps, click on this subscribe button and activate the bell so you don't miss anything. Leave your like too, because it helps me keep bringing videos like this and makes this message reach more people who need to know this. And he shares this video with that friend of yours who is always complaining about work, but never notices the signs that he is being exploited. And if you want to find out how to know if people talk bad about you at work, watch now the next video that is appearing on your screen. See you there.